Imagine the horizon of ancient Egypt. The sun has not yet risen, but the faint line of gold already stretches across the dunes. The air is still cool, though you can feel the weight of heat waiting to arrive. And there, emerging from the haze, the pyramids, vast, angular, silent. To us, they are perfect. Eternal, they seem untouched by time. Vast puzzles of stone defying gravity, defying decay. But what do we really know beyond their grandeur? Behind every smooth limestone face was a story of dust, sweat, fatigue, and fragile human endurance. The pyramids were not made by slaves in chains, whipped and starved. The myth we inherited a story born of later centuries and colored by our modern imaginations. In truth, the builders were free men, peasants, artisans, and laborers, organized into teams, sustained by food, beer, and pride in royal service. And yet, free is a complicated word. Their freedom existed within the will of the state, within a system that demanded their bodies in time in exchange for a pharaoh's immortality. Each stone, shaped and placed, represented a small sacrifice. Each block a day of muscle, a lifetime shortened by exhaustion. This is not a story of kings and gods, but of the thousands who raised eternity with their bare hands. And tonight, we step quietly into their world, into the rhythm of their labor, the hum of their tools, the breath between their heartbeats. The desert awakens slowly. The first streak of sunlight touches the tops of the palm trees that line the Nile, glimmering faintly against the still water. Mist drifts lazily above the surface, and for a few quiet moments, the air feels almost cool. Then, movement begins. In the worker-s village, built from sun-baked bricks and carefully laid out in neat rectangular rows, a murmur of life spreads from hut to hut. Fires are stirred from the previous night's ash, clay pots are lifted. You can almost smell it, the scent of baking bread, smoke, and barley mash mingling with the faint sweetness of early morning air. The settlement is not a random sprawl. It is organized, meticulously planned, just as everything else connected to the pharaoh's grand vision. Here live the men who raise the stones, the craftsmen who shape them, the bakers, brewers, toolmakers, and overseers who sustain the colossal enterprise. To imagine their lives, you must forget the idea of chains and whips. Archaeology tells us these were not slaves, at least, not in the way Hollywood once showed us. They were laborers recruited from villages across Egypt, serving as part of a kind of national duty, called corvée labor. Their service might last for several months, after which they returned home, replaced by others who took their place beneath the sun. Still, this was not a choice freely made. It was obligation, service to the divine ruler, whose will shaped the earth itself. But within this system, there was dignity and structure. Each worker belonged to a crew, usually a few hundred men strong. Each crew divided again into smaller gangs, often with names that reflected pride and humor: the drunkards of Menkaure, the enduring ones of Khufu, the followers of the White Crown. Their names are still found carved discreetly on the hidden blocks within the pyramids. Graffiti left by men who knew they were building something extraordinary. In these simple inscriptions, scratched in red ochre or charcoal, their voices whisper across time. We did this. We were here. The day begins early, before the sun rises fully. Men wake on reed mats, stretch sore muscles, and share their first meal: coarse barley bread, dried onions, perhaps some dates. They drink beer, not the kind we know today, but a thick, porridge-like brew, slightly sour and full of calories. Children chase one another between huts. Dogs bark softly. The air, still gentle now, carries the distant sound of hammers already striking stone at the quarry nearby. As the workers walk to the construction site, the desert opens before them wide and pale, dotted with ramps and scaffolding, wooden sledges waiting like beasts of burden. The sound of many feet crunching over sand merges into a low, steady rhythm. The pyramid site is alive with motion. Thousands of bodies moving in quiet coordination, pulling, hauling, lifting, shouting commands that blend with the wind. Copper chisels ring against limestone, wooden mallets thud. Some men cut blocks from nearby quarries. Others smooth the surfaces with dolerite pounding stones round, heavy, and worn from use. Water carriers move back and forth, pouring water over the sand to make it slick. The sledges, laden with massive blocks, glide more easily on the damp ground, a small miracle of physics rediscovered by modern scientists. Nearby, teams of rope pullers strain together in synchronized movement. Their muscles tense and relax in unison, guided by the rhythm of songs or shouted counts. You can imagine the cadence, deep voices rising and falling in time with each pull. There is hierarchy, of course. Form and pace between groups, keeping order, offering direction, occasionally adjusting ropes, or shouting corrections. But discipline here is not purely fear-based. It's logistical, practical. The sheer coordination of thousands of men demands precision. As the sun rises higher, the air grows heavy and bright. Shadows shrink to nothing. The pyramid's white limestone gleams so fiercely that men must shade their eyes with linen cloth. The heat presses down on the earth like a weight. Each breath feels slower, thicker. Dust clings to skin. The smell of sweat and stone fills the air. At midday, they pause. Small shelters of reed and cloth offer patches of shade. Men sit quietly, eating from clay bowls bread, salted fish, maybe lentil stew. They drink again, beer mostly, and water carried in heavy jars. Some lie down for a brief rest, staring at the shimmering horizon. Others joke or trade gossip about which crew moved the most stone, which village back home has had the best harvest, or who among them might be promoted to foreman soon. Occasionally, a scribe passes through the site, a man of ink and reed pen, recording progress, writing in elegant hieratic script how many blocks were moved that day, how many workers fell ill, how many days remain before the next delivery of copper tools from Memphis. When the sun begins to descend, the work slows. The light softens. Long shadows stretch across the site, turning the sand gold back in the village. The ovens glow again, great circular kilns where bread is baked for thousands. The bakeries are massive operations, producing food day and night. The brewers work beside them, stirring great vats of fermenting grain, the air thick with warmth and the yeasty scent of beer. The workers return, covered in dust, their arms aching. They wash at communal basins, then gather in small groups for the evening meal. They sit cross-legged on the ground, dipping bread into stew, talking quietly. Some men carve small figurines from leftover stone, perhaps as charms for protection. Others sing softly songs that speak of home, of the river, of rest. Children laugh, chasing each other through alleys until the stars appear. And then, night settles fully. The desert cools quickly. The wind becomes a whisper. The fires dim, one by one, until only a few embers glow faintly in the dark. In the distance, the half-built pyramid stands silent, a vast outline against the starlit sky. No one speaks of it now. It is simply there, immense, patient, waiting for the next day's labor. The workers sleep. Their bodies ache, but their hearts are steady. They know their sons will take their place, and their sons after them. They cannot imagine tourists or cameras, or the centuries of fascination their work will inspire. To them, it is not myth, not glory, not even mystery. It is simply life. The life of a builder measured in bread and sweat, in rhythm and repetition, in the quiet satisfaction of effort made eternal through stone. The stars above Egypt burn faintly through the haze of sand, and for a moment, the entire world feels still. The workers asleep, the pyramid rising slowly toward the heavens, the desert breathing, ancient and endless. The pyramid stands silent now, but in its making it was a living organism. Each block was like a heartbeat, each sound of the mallet or pull of the rope, a pulse in a vast and endless rhythm of human will. But behind the grandeur, beyond the clean lines and the geometry so perfect it defies time, there was cost. A quiet, steady cost, paid not in gold or jewels, but in bodies and breath. Imagine for a moment what it means to move stone. Not a pebble or a brick, but thousands of blocks, each one weighing 2 or 3 tons, some even more. Each block had to be cut from quarries, great open wounds in the desert where men toiled from dawn to dusk. They struck at the rock with copper chisels that dulled quickly in the heat. They lifted dolerite pounders, heavy spheres of black stone, again and again, hour after hour, until the surface cracked. Each swing sent a small vibration through their bones. Their palms blistered, then calloused. Dust clung to sweat. The sound, a rhythmic clang, deep and dull, echoed endlessly across the quarry walls. And when the stone finally broke free, it had to be shaped, trimmed, smoothed, squared, with precision. No modern tools, no pulleys, only muscle, patience, and time. Once shaped, the blocks were hauled on wooden sledges, drawn by teams of men. They used ropes made from papyrus fiber or twisted palm, rough on the skin, cutting into their hands. To ease the friction, workers poured water onto the sand, the wet grains clinging together, allowing the sledges to glide. It was a small miracle of observation, a quiet ingenuity that turned physics into survival. Yet even with this method, every pull demanded strength, the kind of strength built not in the gymnasiums of the future, but through hunger, repetition, and necessity. Every movement was coordinated, every step measured. The men sang together to keep time, their chants low and steady, carrying over the sound of the desert wind. The sun above Egypt is not gentle. It is merciless, unblinking, constant. By midday, the stone itself grew hot to the touch, radiating warmth back into the air. Men wrapped linen around their heads and shoulders, but the protection was meager, sweat mixed with dust, forming a fine crust over their skin. Their mouths were dry, lips cracked, the air shimmered, the horizon bending slightly in the heat. In this shimmering light, mirages appeared, shapes of water that weren't there, shadows of trees that dissolved as one drew closer. Still, the work did not stop. The overseers, often educated men loyal to the pharaoh, kept strict records. How many stones cut? How many transported? How many men fallen ill? These lists survive on fragments of limestone, ancient tally sheets, the bureaucracy of empire written in ink, long faded. Some men fainted from exhaustion. Others, bitten by desert insects or weakened by dehydration, would not rise again. Their deaths were noted, sometimes simply as absent, and the work continued. Archaeological excavations near the Giza Plateau revealed something quietly human: cemeteries for the workers themselves. Not tossed aside, not discarded, but buried with care. Wrapped in linen, laid in small graves, sometimes with simple offerings, bread, pottery, amulets. Their bones tell the story that words could not: fractures that healed crookedly, spines compressed from years of strain, arthritic joints in men who likely never saw old age. And yet, there were also signs of healing, evidence of treatment, of care, broken bones that had been set, wounds that had mended. This suggests something profound, that these workers lived within communities that looked after one another. Perhaps it was friendship, perhaps necessity, perhaps a small fragment of shared humanity in an otherwise relentless system of divine labor. At night, after the day's toil, they might have gathered around fires, telling stories of home, of the Nile, of spirits and gods who watched over the dead. They might have laughed quietly, sharing bits of roasted fish or onions, grateful at least for the cool air and the company of others who understood the same exhaustion. The work never truly stopped. When one season of labor ended, another began. When one crew returned home, another replaced them. The pyramid rose slowly, endlessly, one layer after another, like a mountain being grown by human hands. This was not just construction, it was ritual. Every movement an offering to the pharaoh, every block a step toward eternity. The Egyptians believed their ruler was divine, a living bridge between gods and men. To build for him was to build for the universe itself. Even the smallest worker, dragging a rope or mix and mortar, was part of something sacred. And yet, for all that sacredness, the toll remained heavy. Few who worked on the Great Pyramids ever saw them completed. They gave their lives, their strength, their breath, to something far greater than themselves, and something they would never truly enjoy. The pharaoh would rest within the pyramid's heart. They would rest in the sand beyond it. Thousands of years later, we stand in awe of these monuments, their precision, their scale, their endurance. But the human cost behind them remains largely invisible. History remembers the names of the rulers Khufu, Kafur, Menkaure, but not the man who shaped the final corner block, or the woman who baked bread for the workers' camp, or the child who fetched water from the Nile, her bare feet leaving prints that the wind quickly erased. And yet, the mark of their existence remains, not carved into stone, but pressed into time. Each pyramid, in truth, is not only a tomb of kings, it is a monument to endurance, to the ordinary men and women who carried the burden of a civilization's ambition on their shoulders. As you imagine them in the glow of the setting sun, the sound of hammer and chisel fading into silence, you might sense the strange peace of their labor. Their world was narrow. The next block, the next rope, the next breath. And yet, through that narrowness, they achieved something vast. The stones remain, unmoved by millennia, but their makers, nameless, sunburned, and mortal, were the true foundation upon which eternity was built. Their hands are gone, their names erased, but their work still whispers through the heat. The building of a pyramid was never just a feat of engineering. It was an act that reshaped an entire civilization's rhythm. Every stone that rose toward the sky was supported by countless unseen hands. Not only the laborers at Giza, but farmers, craftsmen, and traders scattered across the Nile Valley. To raise a monument for the pharaoh was to shift the balance of a nation. In Egypt, in all its abundance, paid that price over generations. At the heart of this system was the Nile, the river that gave life, food, and meaning to every settlement that lined its banks. Each year, when the river flooded, fields were submerged in rich black silt. For a few months, farming halted, and in those idle seasons, the kingdom gathered men from the village's workers, stone haulers, rope makers, cooks, and sent them to the building sites. It was not always forced labor. Some came through duty, others through the promise of steady food and clothing. But the pattern was inescapable. When the river swelled, Egypt turned its farmers into builders. Their absence left quiet marks at home. Crops that might have been tended more carefully went to weeds. Harvests came in smaller. Families learned to live with less because the pharaoh's vision demanded more. And still, the supply chains had to move. Grain, meat, beer, tools, wood, linen all had to flow toward the construction zones in a rhythm that mirrored the work itself. Records scratched onto shards of pottery speak of rations measured with precision. So many loaves, so many jars of beer, so many bundles of reeds. It was a system vast enough to feed thousands, coordinated enough to last decades. But such organization comes with consequence. The state grew powerful, centralized, watchful. What began as a sacred duty became a mechanism of control, a machine that could mobilize and direct the lives of its people as easily as it moved stone. Egypt became a country built on cycles of obligation. Those who served earned the favor of their rulers. Those who didn't risked obscurity. A man's worth could be measured not by what he owned, but by how much of his time belonged to the state. And so, the pyramids did not just shape the skyline, they shaped society itself. A network of administrators, scribes, and overseers grew alongside the builders. They counted, recorded, and commanded, each layer of management mirroring the layers of the pyramid rising before them. In this way, Egypt learned to organize at a scale no civilization had managed before. Temples, canals, roads, all would later follow the model the pyramids established. An entire kingdom trained to move in unison toward a single monumental goal. Yet while the state grew in strength, ordinary life adapted quietly around it. In the villages, people adjusted to the rhythm of absence. Wives learned to manage households alone for months at a time. Children grew up with stories of fathers who worked under the sun at Giza, of brothers who never returned, of men buried not in tombs of gold, but beneath the sand beside their work. There was pride, perhaps the pride of contributing to something eternal, but also a weariness that threaded through generations. Because for all its glory, the pyramid's shadow stretched far. The flow of resources, the grain, the livestock, the human energy, created ripples that changed Egypt's balance forever. It bound the people to their rulers through labor and devotion, and at the same time, reminded them that eternity was not theirs to claim. When the final stone was laid, and the last procession moved through the temple causeway, the fields still waited to be plowed again. The flood would come, the cycle would renew, and Egypt, resilient, disciplined, and patient, would return to its river, bearing quietly the weight of its own grandeur. The pharaoh's pyramid stood complete, a perfect geometry against the horizon. But beneath that stillness lay centuries of motion, the pulse of a nation that gave everything it had, again and again, for a promise carved in stone. The pyramids have stood for more than 4,000 years. They rise from the desert like frozen sunlight, pale, sharp, enduring, but for all their symmetry they are not just monuments to geometry or power. They are echoes, vast and silent, of the people who once lived in their shadow. When most people think of Egypt's pyramids, they imagine a mystery. How were they built? Why? What secrets are still hidden within? But the real mystery, the quieter one, lies not in the stones themselves. It lies in the lives that built them, and in how easily those lives were forgotten. The builders left few names. They were not pharaohs or priests. They were the hands that lifted, the shoulders that carried, the backs that bent. And yet, their fingerprints remained, pressed into bricks of dried mud found near workers' villages, scrawled onto limestone with sketches of laughter, and carved into fragments of pottery that once held their daily rations. Each mark, each trace, is a reminder that civilization's wonders are not born from genius alone, but from persistence, from repetition, from countless ordinary days that blur together in the dust and heat. Imagine standing now at the base of the Great Pyramid. The wind is soft, moving through centuries of silence. The air carries the scent of sand and sun-warmed stone. In the distance, the city hums, a new world built around an ancient one. Cars and voices replace the sound of chisels and sledges, but the feeling of scale of awe remains the same. You might look up and feel small, and perhaps that is the point. For the pyramids were meant to humble, to remind those who gazed upon them that eternity was not for everyone. Only the divine ruler would pass through death into forever. The rest would remain part of the earth, their labor absorbed into the structure of the afterlife they helped create. And yet, in a quiet way, the builders achieved their own immortality, not through name or title, but through endurance. Through the fact that their work still stands, still casts shadows on the desert floor, still draws the gaze of every traveler, every dreamer, every restless soul who wonders how such perfection came from human hands. It's easy, when we speak of ancient monuments, to talk only of kings and gods. But perhaps the truer story, the one that lingers softly through time, is the story of shared humanity, of what people will do when given a task so vast that it seems impossible, of how far belief, or duty, or fear can drive a civilization. The pyramids, for all their splendor, are not just tombs. They are records, written in stone, of effort, hierarchy, suffering, and hope. They are reminders that behind every shining triumph of history is a chorus of unseen lives. When night falls over Giza and the air cools at last, the desert quiets into a stillness so complete it feels timeless. The stars, the same that once guided those ancient workers, scatter like silver dust above the pyramid's edge. The stones glow faintly in the moonlight, their surfaces worn smooth by wind and centuries. Somewhere out there, beneath the sand, lie the ruins of the workers' village, their homes, their hearts, the bones of those who built eternity. And in that silence, one begins to understand that the true monument of Egypt is not a single pyramid, but the collective will of its people, the quiet strength of thousands who labored, believing that in serving one man's eternity, they might earn a fragment of their own. So when we look upon these wonders today, perhaps it's worth remembering what they truly are, not only symbols of power, but of human endurance, of the endless balance between faith and burden, between creation and cost. The desert will outlast us all, and the pyramids, steady and watchful, will continue to rise from the horizon, their stones whispering faintly in the wind, telling and retelling the story of what it means to build something that lasts forever, even when life itself does not. And so, as your eyes grow heavy, and the sound of the desert fades into your breathing, you might find comfort in the thought that the hands that shaped these stones were once as human as yours, as tired, as hopeful, as small beneath the stars. Rest, then, in their shadow. History will keep its watch. And as we leave this place of stone and silence, the wind settles again across the desert. It moves like breath over centuries, soft, unhurried, carrying with it the voices of those who came before. The pyramids stand unchanged, their edges faint against the stars. They do not rush, they do not speak. They simply endure. It's humbling to think that the same constellations watched over the builders as they rest now over you, that the same rhythm of day and night, of labor and sleep, has turned without pause since those ancient times. What we call history is perhaps only the echo of countless quiet evenings like this one, moments of stillness after toil, when tools are set down and the body remembers the meaning of rest. So as the last traces of thought drift across your mind, imagine the world dimming gently, the sands cooling under the night sky, the great stones gleaming softly like embers of a forgotten age. You have walked through time tonight, through dust and sunlight, through voices long silent, and now the past can rest. And so can you. Let the world fade to quiet. Let your breathing slow. The pyramids will still be here in the morning, steadfast, ancient, and calm. And beneath their shadow, you too can find your peace. Good night.